after there's input from this, of the concept by the Planning Commission, then the presenters will have working things that they need to do. At this point, since there is no decision or discussion items that this is happening, there is not public input at this point. This will come back the next session as soon as they do that, directly to the public for input with any input that's come from here. That's how the process works. That's the process that we will maintain as we go through this. So, with that being said, we have a concept presentation workshop, PUD-0000391-2025. Now, if we could have our presenters come up and begin with your presentation of Varsity 3.
Do we need to sign in?
We know who you are.
All right, well, I'm John Silkworth. This is my cousin Jeff Silkworth. We currently own the housing development called Varsity Club over next to the old Bilo. I appreciate all the new members on the board. I know a lot of you guys around, so I appreciate it. I was on the zoning board for a long time. We appreciate you guys volunteering. I know it's a tough job and a lot of work. So just a little bit of background, then I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. He's going to talk a little bit about the land that we're purchasing and how we came to get it. But real brief background, 2015, we built what the Varsity Club 1 is right now. That's 15 three-bedroom houses right across from the Bilo. Wound up selling that project shortly after we got it done, and then subsequently buying some more property behind it. We bought Varsity Club back and then expanded it with what we're calling Varsity Club 2, which was 11 duplexes. Each one have 2 bedrooms in them. So the total development right now between phase 1 and 2 is 36 units, 87 bedrooms back there. And a little bit about it, we asked some questions just so we could come talk to you a little bit about it. The 2-bedroom units that we just recently completed, those are about a third undergrad students, a third grad students, and a third young professionals. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff now. He's going to talk a little bit about the phase 3 land, why we're purchasing it.
So I'm going to give you a kind of an overview, but before I did that, a lot of you know John, and he went to school here. He's built a lot of student housing, not only in Clemson, but throughout the Southeast. He's very skilled. He's probably humbled at that. I would tell you he's delivered many projects on time, on budget, and so just from the capability standpoint. You don't know me. My name's Jeff Silkworth. My background is I've spent 35 years in commercial banking. I've financed hundreds of large commercial construction projects, anywhere from residential development, land development, to large buildings in the city. I was with an $85 million regional bank for those years, and seen a lot of stuff. And then I've been involved in development myself. Our family is actually from Ann Arbor, so we did a lot of stuff in a college town, which is similar to Clemson in that sense. But just I wanted to give you guys an idea. John and I did this project here at Varsity. It's worked out very well, and we're excited about this next opportunity. So the overview of this property, which I think is important, is as we were doing that project, we were talking to the family that it's known as the Hobie Singleton parcel. Hobie purchased that property back in 1923. He was quite a gentleman. He had a lot more of that property around there, and he's sold it off or donated it to relatives over the years. What's remaining is about 17 acres total in 2 parcels. We talked to the family. Initially, their position was they really didn't want to sell it. There was sentimental feelings about the property and what they're and many of the cases their grandfather had put together. But as we talked to them, we asked what was important, and there's a lot of family members that each generation that goes, it gets more complicated. And we talked to them about maybe the concept of a park or some open areas, and that we wanted to do something nice there on the property. As we looked into it and spoke with them, we finally came to an agreement where they said, hey, we like you guys, we think you will do something there. Part of our presentation is going to talk about the park, and if there's a way to commemorate Mr. Singleton, I think that would be nice to be able to do, and we can talk about that. But I will tell you, so once we were able to get the large piece of property there, we picked up a couple other small pieces that we purchased in the back and have under contract. The piece that's on Summit Street there, that would be our entrance to the property. But when we looked at it, that, as you guys probably reviewed this, it's R2 now, which is, basically we can get duplex units on there. If you do it out, we figured there's about 360 beds over that, almost 18 acres we could get. But when we looked at that, it's like it would sort of be more of the sprawling. It wouldn't have as much open space if we did that, and we don't think it's the best use of the property. We had considered looking at the R3.5 and just looking for a zoning change, but then John was talking about the PUD, Plan Unit Development, and we thought that might be a nice compromise, because that way the city could have an input on exactly what was going to be there, where a zoning change, that's not necessarily true. So we thought this concept would be better. Part of what we're trying to accomplish here, and we've been listening to what the city's been trying to accomplish, like through the TIF, for example, and some of the things, and trying to say, okay, well, how could we build this? So one, it's a nicer product. We're able to help help the city and the community accomplish some of the goals that they have, and still make it an economical project for us, as a project. The reality is in Clemson, it's a student town. I mean, it's a university town, and the demand for housing is there now, nationally. I've been to several conferences, and you talk to like the big players, but the players across the board, and Clemson always comes up as one of the number 1 or 2 markets. Tennessee is one of them, but Clemson comes up because South Carolina is growing. It's probably the premier university, state university in Clemson, and there's a lot of research money that comes here, and there's going to be demand. As a matter of fact, the big players will tell you there's a lot more demand. So we've looked at that, and we've consulted with, I've talked to some appraisers who work on this, and the term highest and best use really is in play here, where it's like, well, what is that property's best use? And we've considered that, where it's located, and how to make a nice development there. So we're asking for, I believe it's around 450, John, what's the exact number? 440 units compared to like the 360 under the R2. Part of the reason we're asking for that is because it helps it make it more economical, because of the parts of the property that we are looking to provide the city for some finished lots for either workforce or affordable housing, which is one of the city's goals as we understand it, and then also create some park space, which those are both components of a PUD, some walking trails and that. So I'm going to let John talk about specifics about the development, but just to summarize again, is our goal is to build a really nice project here, that has more open space than maybe we would if we build it based on the current zoning, and be able to provide the city with some things that would help accomplish some of their goals. So thank you, appreciate your time. Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to, I guess I'll start with just going through some of the broader numbers. So Varsity Club 1 and 2.
John,
Yes, sir.
if we could kind of try to start and do this part in about 10 minutes.
You got it. Varsity Club 1 and 2 currently have approximately 9.2 units per acre. That's on the 15 houses and the 11 duplexes, at 9.2 units per acre. What we're proposing is approximately 10.2 units per acre. Varsity 1 and 2, approximately 22 beds per acre. What we're proposing is 26 beds per acre. I think one of the other components of this is the bedroom mix that we are proposing. We're proposing 91 bedroom units, which equals 52% of the overall units are going to be one bedroom. And I think that lends itself to some of the things I talked about on phase 2, that the smaller the unit, is this going to be just one colossal student housing project? We think that the ones are, while they're more expensive to build, considerably more expensive to build, while you don't see a lot of them in Clemson, it's an underserved market. However, we see a market for it, and we see it attracting, not just students, grad students, younger professors that are working, TAs, lecturers, and then just the public as a whole. So that's one of the things we've tried to solve is how do we, not just slam in. If you recall the Bilo PD that came in last year, it was a ring of 4 and 5 bedroom. Let's ram as many in under one roof as we can. And frankly, that was a student community, and I don't think they hid that. That's what they said it was. So by having more than half of our units dedicated to the one bedroom, we feel like that is that's going to minimize some of the concerns that you might typically get out of one of the larger student housing communities. The neighborhood that surrounds us, the 3 houses that you see to the south of the site, the gray boxes there, are rentals. Those have been primarily historical rentals. Houses to the left of Fabrica near the logo, those are permanent residents. We've been in communication with those folks, not the larger parcel up there, but the 2 directly to the west of it. We've been in communication with those folks. The folks to the north on Hawthorne, we just purchased small parcels from them. We've told them that, and we've told the family, they're relatives of the family of Hobie Singleton. We've told them we don't intend to even ask them to purchase their property. As much sense as it might make and as much property as they have, we've told them that we'll respect their wishes. We're not going to make pitches, offers. They've been there a long time, and it's our intent to leave them there for a long time. If you can scroll back down briefly, Art. The houses, the 2 gray structures to the left of the purple and blue, or to the north, that's Reverend Cannon lives in that house. He's, I think he's like 93 right now. He's the guy that has the putt-putt courses around his yard. Similar to him, he's related to the Singleton clan, and we've not approached him. He's, again, and if you see the red line to the left there, that is he's landlocked right now, and we're gonna dedicate looks like a 15-foot easement to maintain access for his house. So trying to take into consideration some of those, I guess, just considerations, for lack of a better way to put it. Address some of that. The going back up to the north, we've got the park there on Hawthorne Street. Again, trying to strategically place the park next to the longtime residents, Brenda and Edith to the left, and then on the south side of Hawthorne, where we just purchased some of their property, using that as either the green area up, to the left, dedicating that as part of our Ribbon Walk Park to create natural buffers for those folks. Talked about the unit count, the existing neighbors, and then if you want to scroll all the way up, Art, the 10 lots that we intend to deed to the city. I reached out to Andy Blondo from the city of Clemson. I know he was kind of spearheading the TIF. Now that the TIF is dead, I asked him for his input. Andy, what do you want them to look like? Could they be affordable? Could they be habitat? Could they be attainable? we're open to anything. We will commit to build the infrastructure, the road, the water, the sewer, and make them pad ready. Give them to you at grade, construction ready. That we feel good about. Just a real brief backstory. And Kelly, if you don't mind, just tell me when I get to 5 minutes on that timer, or Herb, if you don't mind.
You got 5 minutes?
Okay, if you want to scroll back down, about, I don't know, Nathan, you might know too, about maybe 3 or 4 months ago when the TIF program looked like it was on life support, reached out to Andy, said, how can we help maybe maintain this program for you? So Andy was kind enough to facilitate a meeting with myself and Laura Stoner at Clemson University, who's kind of in charge of land management. And we went in with a plan to her to swap the 11 acres north of Hawthorne Street with the land in that bubble going across the street where the original TIF was going to have the lease to own property that they were willing to do with the city. And Laura, very nice lady, took the time to meet with me. After about 20 minutes, she said, okay, here it is. It's about a 4-year process, named all the organizations that we would have to meet with and adhere to their guidelines. And then the last one, she said, and that's, then we'll get with the U.S. Forestry Commission and see what they say about it, which to me was a very polite way to say that's not going to happen. Now, you might say, well, why were they going to lease the land to the city of Clemson to let them put houses all over it? We didn't quite get that far, other than we thought, we'd heard enough. So again, very nice lady, took the time to meet with us. A lot of gratitude to Andy to put the meeting together, because, a lot of times, people don't need to stick their neck out for it, but I thought Andy did a really good job trying to make that happen. Didn't happen. That's what led us back to, okay, if we can't do that, and that would have been a great deal. We agreed to deed that land to the city of Clemson, entitle it, get the engineering done, get the architecture done. Could have saved the city. I don't want to speculate. Brian, you've seen engineers aren't cheap. So we thought we were putting our best foot forward. Didn't happen. That's what dropped us back to, okay, what can we give the city of Clemson to accomplish their goals? And that's how we carved out those 10 lots on the north side of the site. So talked a little bit about the placement of them, the topo. I'm sure you guys have been back there. That 11 acres is, it's scary. It's a ravine, it's a pit. Trying to figure out, okay, it's back there, it's vacant. How do we make something work? And this is what we came up with, just from, like Jeff talked about, just feasibility economically. It's a ton of earthwork back there, and kind of like what we came up with, we reached out to Tony Tidwell. He's the city horticulturist. He gave us feedback on the Ribbon Park. One of his primary pieces of feedback, he'd like to see that park, that ribbon walk, do a circular loop, so you can kind of go in from Hawthorne and meander your way back out. So we're going to work on that for the next meeting. Jay Bennett, we reached out to him. No feedback yet, but again, one of the things we want to make sure is front and center is one, like we say, like Jay, here's a park, and Jay might say, oh great, I need another park to mow and to fix tennis nets, things like that. So we're willing to work with Jay on that if he wants us to maintain it for a certain period of time, maintain the bathrooms, mow it. We're open to working with Jay and make sure it's it's the least amount of burden on him. The pavilion, one of the things we talked about with the Singleton plan that Jeff alluded to, the park, they have a family reunion in Clemson once a year, and they really don't have anywhere to meet. It's kind of a historical Cadillac Heights community. So one of the things, Lignan, one of the kind of like the matriarch of the clan, and there's a lot of them, talked about, they have to go to the Best Western to have their family reunion. So similar to like the Red Hill community over on the other side of town, they go down to Clemson. That's not Clemson Park, but the by Stone Church Road.
Dawson Park.
Yeah, so they have facilities down there now. The city just put in a bathroom, and they have their yearly party down there. So we were thinking something similar for that clan. And it's again, it's a large group of people that has. You can imagine they're third generation now. And that's the generation we're dealing with, the grandkids, but there's grandkids, now those folks have grandkids. So could be a great benefit. Cadillac Heights really doesn't have something like that right now. And again, we feel like, you know, it can be leveraged and the community as a whole can benefit from it. And that's kind of how we did the placement of it, kind of served multiple purposes. Buffer for the long-time existing residents on the two sides. And again, just giving them something they want. If Jay comes back, says, look, pickleball's out, basketball's in, we're willing and ready to listen and make it the best park we possibly can. And then getting feedback from, I don't know who it would be, I talked to Jake a little bit about it, is how do we donate those lots? Who do they get donated to? I guess we'll defer to the commission to make a recommendation to council. Is it gonna be Habitat? Is there bandwidth for a community housing trust? Or, you know, again, we're open, want to accommodate, want to help Clemson launch hopefully the first of its kind program to put a dent in a nagging issue of how do we do something? Is this going to solve all of it at once? Of course not. However, potentially a proof of concept to say this can work. We can leverage certain kind of developments to put a dent in a long lasting
much more time
I will
do
say
you
one last thing on those houses. If you all say, no, we want 20 townhouses there, we could do that too. Maybe it's not a single family format, maybe it's an apartment format, we're open to that too. Sorry, Herb.
No, I was just wondering, it's nothing to be sorry about, I was just asking, do you need more time?
I don't, I think I hopefully there's enough there for you all to come up with some questions if we can expand on it, but thank you for listening.
No, thank you for your presentation, and we just try to make efficient use of our time because it's fully expected that this commission spend their time in doing their research on what you've submitted prior to this and to be ethical and above board. And I'm quite confident that they've already walked in here with a lot of questions as well. So is there anybody that would like to begin? And we can go through.
Can I just make sure, all right, can you guys zoom up just a little bit? No, the other one, I'm sorry. The other one. Those green buildings right there, those are phase two, not the ones he's got, but the ones up there, that's the phase two varsity right there where it says the 21.
Correct, 21, 42 beds, yeah.
You've already got those planned out to get started?
We've already executed those are done.
And occupied.
Oh, those are already, oh yeah, because that's right, you go up there and come back down, yeah. Okay, here's a bigger.
And then trying to match the entrances, again, to you know, I'm sure people are gonna wonder about traffic, things like that, trying to match those entrance for the new phase across the street. So believe it or not, it is contiguous property. We've got approximately 4.5 acres on the south side, and then there's 11.5 acres on the north side that are contiguous, albeit through a very obscure wraparound, but that acreage is contiguous. Where the green, Charlie, so you're like, where the green is, trying to bring that out.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, a couple of my questions were, and you kind of hit on it a little bit, would be, you know, I certainly think we need to get Jay's input regarding the upkeep. You know, does he have the bandwidth to be able to handle another park right now?
Right.
Especially with what's going on at Nettles, the expansion, and of course that adds to more. And then I saw down here is the little pavilion area.
Yeah.
Would that be something that you all would be constructing with restrooms as a part of this?
Yes.
Okay, and about estimate right now off top, what would be the size of that?
Probably 40 by 60, something like that. I mean, and again, we'll get the input. Maybe you don't want family reunions there, but enough for it to be practical, like where, you know, you're not stuffing 100 people under it. Hopefully, you know, a practical event space, I guess is the best way to frame it.
Okay. Kind of going back through this, through the written information that you provided, down on the other project uses when you have installing the infrastructure for the EV charging stations. Mm-hmm. Who did you have in mind doing the maintenance and upkeep of that?
If it's on private property, we'll maintain it, and if let's say there was a need for it at the park, I mean, we could, you know, we're gonna grade that entire site, so to get the infrastructure in for that would be, you know, something that'd be similar like a light pole installation, in terms of stubbing up the power for it, getting it installed, so. On-site, we'll have it, just because it's the new normal, that there are enough electric vehicles out there where it supports it, and then we would maintain it just like any other amenity or piece of infrastructure or utility infrastructure on the site.
Yeah, I don't know that the city wants to get in the business of maintaining EV chargers.
I doubt, yeah, same thing, like, thanks, no, yeah. Yeah, gotta hire a guy to maintain them. So, yeah, we're open to all the above, and if it's at the park too, you know, I could see somebody saying, well, that's a nuisance at the park, because now I got a kid leaving his Tesla, or anybody leaving their Tesla there every night. We don't know if somebody's sleeping in their car or charging the car. So if it's not wanted at the park, by all means, we won't do it. But to answer your question, yeah, we'll maintain it if it's on our site. Yeah.
In this scenario, I mean, the build out is planned for the parks. I mean, you plan to build out the parks 100% based on the plan right now and then turn them back over to the city?
We've talked about it. We may phase the site and start with the southern half. The stuff currently behind Varsity Club, if it's a condition that we go in and at least run the infrastructure for the park and construct the park, as a condition of that, we're willing to do that too. Just depending on our start date and things of that nature of how much of the actual vertical we're willing to commit to might be phased. But I think we're comfortable saying we deliver the park as part of phase one, yeah.
But the plan is to turn all that over to the city, right? Basically, the city's gonna maintain the park, the city's gonna.
Waiting on Jay's feedback. If Jay says, yeah, to your point, now I need to hire a new, you know, now you're costing me money, we're open, we're gonna be mowing 17 acres every 2 weeks. If we added the park, I'm sure there's some, whether we gotta provide some sort of insurance, whatever, to third party, mow the park and maintain the park, I think we're willing to commit to that. You know, whether it's restroom maintenance after events, things like that. I think we have enough scale out here where asking us to do that wouldn't be that big of a problem.
And part of that's in our budget. I mean, that's really kind of, if you conceptually, where you think of it as, if you go from what the current zoning allows to what we're asking for, which isn't, we don't think is really a huge jump, but that helps cover the cost of these other things. And so from a financial plan, you know, we're looking at it where it's like, how do we do something that not only makes sense from an investment standpoint and for our investors, but it's economical enough where it allows us to do the park, do those lots, and, you know, all that underground and infrastructure, you know, is a fair amount of money, but over time, those extra units, 80 units roughly, help cover the cost of that. And that's really the reasoning behind that.
Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Cumming?
Answered all my questions so far.
Any more? Commissioner Crowley?
No, he addressed mine. I was mostly curious about the stuff in the back, the single-family lots, but being able to do townhouses or some other flexibility in there was my biggest concern.
John, is that access to those private lots? That's all stuff you're putting in, right? That road?
Yeah, the road infrastructure.
Yeah, we talked to Jake and I think
So that road is all
Nathan,
new
Jake,
as well.
Nathan and Art, we would dedicate that, we'll build that, all of that to the standards of a public road. We'll turn it over to the city of Clemson. So we'll build it, the width, the composition of the subgrade, the turning radiuses. It'll meet all the standards of a public road that we'll turn over to the city of Clemson. And I guess one of the other things, I mean, I don't want to speak for the other property owners, but that curve, you know, where it kind of naturally wants to meet with Fabrica, if that was ever something that happened down the road, where the city was able to acquire more land, it would make sense for that road just to wind all the way around and connect with Fabrica. Again, not speaking for those property owners at all, but it just kind of made sense how we curved that road and dead-ended it.
As our land planner suggested that, he said, you know.
There's no issues back there with buildability or anything as far as the land? I know there's a project proposed not too far from there. There were some issues where you couldn't do certain things in certain areas.
No, you have the overhead transmission lines, that's a 68-foot easement that you see going down the right side there, north to south. You can't, you know, Duke's got some quirky things, you can drive under it, you can't have a parallel drive path beneath it, which I don't know why that makes sense, but other than being really steep and, you
Well,
know,
that's
like,
not, I mean,
what
there's
are you
no-
crazy? But
Yeah.
again, speaking to Jeff, you know, all seriousness, back to Jeff's point is how do, you know, that land isn't great. It's vacant now. All the land we're proposing to build on is vacant except for 106 Summit at the front. It's all vacant land. There's a reason it's vacant. It's just, it's back there. The property lines are atrocious. Our surveyor loves it when we call him because he spends days back there going over this stuff. A lot of this stuff, you know, like Jeff said, Hobie bought it in 1923. Hobie passed away in 1939. So a lot of it was you know, it was intense. But to answer your original question, no, nothing that we see from a, you know, utility easements, floodplains, disruption of natural water flow, anything like that. Civil engineer, you know, we've engaged everybody, architect, civil engineer, we've looked at it, we've laid this out pretty intricately with the existing grades back there. You know, a lot of it was, well, why did you do it this way? And a lot of it just circled back to because you got to, because it just does this and it's tough. And then one of there's a, believe it or not, a 1/4 acre parcel up to the north there that I think that we would do probably some sort of conservation area. That's in that
Where it says remnant up
yeah,
there.
what is that? That's War Branch Road, I believe, up there. So that will give you some context as how old this property is. You know, the train tracks weren't there. The Hawthorne Street wasn't there. I mean, that's how old some of these plats are, that it just, people started putting roads and railroads through the property.
Any more comments? Concerns?
I assume when you talk to, I mean, this down the road, when you do talk to Jay, if he comes back and says he would rather, if he's good with the park, but he'd rather see a basketball court instead of tennis or something like that, you don't care.
That, and then something that came up with Tony, and again, I asked Jake, or I think I asked you, Tony thought one of the park requirements through a PD is to meet with the neighbors. So reached out to John Fulmer, who's a city council member who has been active back there. So one of our goals this week is to set up a kind of a formal, informal meeting with Brenda, Edith, who will live adjacent to it, Cherie, who lives on the south side of it, and get their input. Because, yeah, Brenda might be like, I don't want to hear a pickleball at 8 o'clock at night, which would be fine. You know, we're proposing to do a brick veneer fence, something above and beyond what would be a typical buffer yard in Clemson, to give them as maximum privacy, maximum separation from us. We'll talk to Tony. Some of the other residents have expressed their desire to maybe beef up some of the buffer zones as they might face some of the adjacent property owners, which we're more than happy to accommodate if the buffer type doesn't exist in the ordinance now. So whether that's we get with Tony and get his input on it, what have you, we'll leverage any asset the city has to make sure it's done right. But to answer your question, this week we plan to meet with those property owners and say, what do you want to see on it? We won't shrink it at all. I mean, yeah, well, you know, whether it's just, you know, it could be a pine tree farm park, so whatever they want.
Last question, you might not know the answer to this. Can the buses get back there?
The buses probably run along Sumney right now is what they do in your current development. I
They
don't
used
know
to-
the answer.
They used to stop at the Bilo when the Bilo was there. We reached out to Cat Bus, Brian, for Cat Bus, and I don't know exactly what's going on at Cat Bus these days. I don't know if they have a director right now.
Just
so-
got a new one.
No, we just hired one. I will have you an answer before the next meeting.
Well, yeah, and there'll be other answers too. I was telling her before, that as part of the next session code, whatever reason, sets out a series of staff reviews for the next session. And so, you know, everything is prescribed as to how, when we do certain things.
I was just curious.
But
so
you'd have to
we'll
get a school bus down into those 10 lots too,
Right.
because the building is public. I mean, I assume they-
Well, if we have to meet the DOT, if it's a public roadway, I think that's what one of the questions I asked. I said, what's the difference between a public and a private? And I believe it's all those things. A hammerhead for a fire truck turn, so the fire
Fire
marshal
truck,
will
yeah,
chime in on
basically,
that
that's
hammerhead,
right,
yeah.
yeah.
And make sure they got the turning radiuses, which I can say with certainty it is designed that way. Our architect, some of the other multiple entrances, if you see like the north and the south, that reduces, although we're under 100 units per side, some of that dictates fire sprinklers in the amenity areas, things like that. So we've talked a lot about fire trucks. School bus does go down Hawthorne. When we were building out there, it was always there. So to answer your question on that, but fire truck, yeah, we'll get with the fire marshal and Stacy if we have to, and just make sure we're understanding that's the whole point of having two entrances is, again, I guess you'll just have one down there, but it's only 10 lots, and I don't think that exceeds a standard. But yeah, if a tree's down in the road, that's the idea. You gotta have a second means of access for a neighborhood.
I think some of the comments that I had, a lot of the commissioners have already asked, but in going through this, and as you go through the next phases, one of the things that we've learned in the past, people asking for PUDs, is that words matter. And so they need to be spelled out very, very clearly. So there are just a couple of comments that I have, but I do want to tell you, and you probably heard it from some of the neighbors, one of the big concerns that there is of course traffic, and that they are thinking about, and with the city, maybe some traffic calming type devices, you know, such as choke points or speed bumps or things like that. I did notice that you'd already put in here in some of the properties of putting buffers. One of the things that I can tell you is that we've had discussions through Jacob and also from input of the city residents that we want to make sure that there are plenty of buffers for existing neighborhoods and places, so more than just in one area. I think that's reasonable to consider. And I think also working out the details, because in yours, I think you put we would meet RM2 or exceed. I think there's some discussion with Jacob of what that really looks like. And in a planned development, we don't go by RM2 or RM3. So in that discussion, that is a discussion I'd like for y'all to have with Jacob and come up with what's reasonable, because a lot of residents have expressed concern about that. And we need to make sure that we do address that. That gives you even more credibility in the Clemson community to do that. In terms of the lots that you're doing, that is addressing a need that we're required by state law to look at. We've been looking at. We are required to do that. We're very much appreciative of that, and that would go in, and I believe Nathan and Andy can tell you how that would go into. There's some other property in the other part of the city where we're doing that. The one question that I have for you that I would like for you to consider is to ensure that detention pond is able to take care of those lots as well. Because the way that it looks right now, it doesn't look like that it's taking care of that. I'm not sure that it's in the size to be able to take care of those lots.
Yeah, that property run, it's fairly steep from the, I guess it would be what, the west side to the east side. And there's the underneath, I will say, and that is a detention pond, but the actual drainage, you know, goes where the transmission lines are. That's sort of the low point in there if you look at the topography of it. And so that's something that we're working with, is how much water can that, you know, that whole area handle there also, and how big is the detention pond need to be. But your point is good, and that's something we're looking at. Is
I'd like for
there's
you
a
to
lot of
consider
water.
that.
Yeah.
Well, it will more than likely be permitted under, again, a contiguous piece of property. So it'll be looked at the full 17 acres. And that'll all be addressed via the SWIP, the DHEC. It's all gonna go to DHEC. So we're not gonna be able to carve those out and say we haven't considered the stormwater runoff
Well,
of those.
it was just from my view and limited knowledge.
It will, yeah.
So,
Nathan, Ethan, they're gonna make sure it's, before it goes
he's
down to
one of my
DHEC.
best friends too.
All right, well, they like looking at that stuff.
So one of the things in here that you put, and I don't want to assume, you put will mostly be rentals.
Yeah,
What were you
everything will be
including
rental
in
except for
that?
the 10 units. Yeah.
Okay, except for the 10 units is what you'd put in there. And then, we just want to make sure when the plan development writing is done, working with everybody, because again, too many people come in with plan developments and there are a lot of words that assume intentions. So if it's what we're gonna do, that it's clearly spelled out of what we're gonna do. The next part in here is that attainable housing would ultimately, and I like what you said, be under city control and design and what they do with their needs study of what ought to be able to be there, and that would be deeded over to them. The other thing to consider that you hadn't addressed yet is lighting, that there's adequate lighting, working with Duke Power to ensure that there's adequate lighting and street lighting throughout the whole development, working with them. I think one of the things that we're finding out now as this city grows, that is a huge issue. And we would like for you to consider that as part of a plan development designation.
Is the lack thereof issue, or?
It's a lack thereof.
Yeah.
Is becoming more considerable for residents, as well as residents of your place, as well as residents in the surrounding area.
Right.
And that's a very huge issue that's being brought up lately.
We did the farm project over off Old Central Road, and we had some deed issues over there with the city, and one of the things we did is we built that bike path down Old Central Road, and then we utilized those Clemson lamps that, when they were redoing the Calhoun district, Andy Blondo was able to get us those light poles to run down Old Central Road and to light that bike path, and that's what I would propose there, is just get the city standards, across the site, but particularly down into those residential units, is maybe use those Clemson lights that have been deployed.
And with that part, I think what y'all come back with when working with planning and zoning and all the other different departments, they can tell you a little more about that. The other thing in here that you had put is that putting sidewalks in when Bilo is eventually developed or whatever, and a pedestrian crosswalk and things like that. Are you wanting to do something before that property's developed or after the property's developed, or what are your thoughts on that? I couldn't understand from reading what you put in here.
I think first and foremost, we'll improve, and Jacob's pretty in tune with this, where we're fronting street frontages, we're gonna have to improve sidewalks there. I think that's part of the ordinance. I think the traffic calming, we're not, if it's in the vicinity, I think we'll work with Jacob on that. In terms of running a sidewalk all the way down, my guess would be, Art, if you don't mind scrolling down, please. So where that main intersection is at Summey and Newton, I believe that's what we were referencing, is making improvements there to that four-way, whether it is ultimately, an ADA compliant, the delineators, things of that nature that will improve that intersection. But to your point, yeah, do we want to run a sidewalk all the way down Newton and then have it ripped up in a year? I don't think that was as far as we were going, but, you know, improvements on the back, and then Art, if you don't mind scrolling up a little bit. Improvements down Hawthorne to the extent of our park. I know the 3 parcels there on the tip just sold. So I do believe one of the city's goals was envisioning that, similar to what we were just talking about down Old Central Road in front of the farm, is interconnecting some of these communities, putting the streetlights in, things like that. So we'll address that with Jake. But to your original point about going all the way down in front of the Bilo, no, but definitely improving that intersection, maybe getting you around to the Courtyard by Marriott, and at least getting you connected to the Planet Fitness and like that, if those sidewalks are outdated, you know.
And that's something we work with planning and engineering to take a look, but y'all are willing to consider that?
Yeah, we want that to be we want it to look good and functional and as much so as we can, yeah.
So in the monument, with what's come up with, in dedication, if that is what's chosen to name as Hobie Singleton Park, something y'all would be willing to invest in?
Yeah, like Jeff said,
Yeah, I mean, we worked with this family, and I mean, truthfully, that's really sort of our passion is to, you know, they've been very cooperative to work with, and you know, it's something that's important to them, and we feel that's, you know, kind of our obligation, you know, with acquiring this property, although it's not required in the contract, because some of the family members didn't want it. Some of them just, you know, and so, yeah, that's something that we would actually recommend, truthfully.
And so I guess the other thing that I would tell you is that you've gone a long way from the standpoint of what I see in addressing some of the community needs and meeting your objectives and what you have done. There's one other community part that I'd like to ask you to consider. It's called the Community Action Foundation. What is that?
I don't know that it really has a name, but.
Yeah. I think it's
John Fulmer would be able to define it better than I would.
Who?
John Fulmer.
In the Andy.
Yep.
Which is a donation to that park to help other residents in that area that may be used for different upgrades. You know, like to their current water, to efficiency in their air conditioner things. Those are big things in this city, and particularly in those areas. And we would like for y'all to talk through with them about that being a consideration so that we could expand that further goodwill that y'all are putting here for the city.
You understand who to contact.
I think John spearheads that program, right?
Yeah, it's just, there's a lot of components to workforce affordable housing. One of them is helping folks age in place, and I think you've mentioned, unintentionally mentioned a lot of that this evening, so I think.
Yeah, like improving, Brennan needed improving the bathroom, improving their kitchen, improving their AC, accessibility.
Oh, okay,
Accessibility to their housing, they can't go up steps anymore.
Okay, yeah.
And I should have the name of it, but I don't, sorry. But that's what
it's fairly new, but
That's what it's called. It is.
Needs some traction, yeah.
You know, when you're talking about throughout the entire community, that helps in doing that, because there are a lot of people, as you know, you talk about affordable, attainable, all of those things. We need people to be able to age in place here as well, and that's a very important component. And with some of the deviations that we're asking for in a PUD, it does allow recovery of some of those funds to be able to do that, and I would just ask that y'all consider that. Any other comments or questions from commissioners at this time?
I don't know if you guys remember, when that Bilo PD came through, they were talking about getting rid of Newton. And so is that still a possibility? Whoever owns that property could get rid of it? And the only reason I bring that up is because this is addressed like, oh, it's gonna run right into it, traffic's gonna go out to the light and all that, but if Newton goes away, then we've got a different set of issues.
It's a city street, so, I mean, if.
Oh, it's, because I think they said it was an alley or something like that.
It could be. I think that was, I mean, that's a good take, but I think that was a function of their plans more than anything.
Okay. But I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't like, okay, this is, so whoever does the bylaw.
We have never discussed internally with our traffic departments about.
No, I didn't figure we would. They were saying that them as like when we're doing our PD, we're gonna do it because it's our property and we can get rid of it. And I just want to make sure that's not a possibility, that whoever owns the bylaw can get rid of it.
I can tell you there's some retention issues, there's some stormwater issues there that would come into play. And then I think I'm remembering correctly, there was quite a bit of pushback against that anyway from.
Oh, there's a lot of, I just want to make sure that if somebody bought it, that is a public, that's not something somebody can decide just for, they really want to just be that guy, they can get rid of it.
Yeah, I'll check the ownership on that before the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense that it's signalized out on Newton, and I remember the Bilo PD they were gonna go down to like where brake clips is and turn in there. Would they get a signal there? Seems like a really good, but you're right, Anthony.
I popped into my head when you mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, they were talking about getting rid of the stoplight there, just want to make sure that's not a thing.
That's a good catch. I'll define who owns that before the next meeting.
Okay.
Of course, if it's a PD, you guys, the city and everyone would have to approve it in a PD situation. Now, if they did it by right, there's not much.
Right, I just wanted to make sure it's one of those things that even it's very low likelihood that, somebody just didn't decide to be that guy, or I'm gonna build a 3-story Bilo and I'm gonna.
We've talked about that, and we were kind of debating back there. The light, is a nice feature, for everybody there with the way we have it designed, but.
I'd have to check notes, but DOT was not crazy about that whole process.
No, they weren't crazy about it, and I think they had said that DOT wouldn't allow another light at the entrance they wanted because that one was there and they weren't gonna move it. That was it, it was there, and that's what you got.
Yeah.
No. Everybody was upset that you'd have to come out at, next to Bojangles or whatever with no light now.
Right, yeah. I'll let John know. Yeah.
So, any other comments from commissioners? At this point? Well, with that point, do you have enough feedback from us to move forward about specifics, about protecting neighborhoods, about other thoughts that we've considered?
Yeah, from the comments, actually, your comments have been very helpful. A lot of those things we discussed, and we were really kind of looking at some of the preference. You clarified some of the things, like we didn't realize, what you're saying about lots specifically, was part of what, we knew that's what the desire was, but, to meet the goals that, probably how we interpreted it, but that's helpful, and, all these things are things that have been on our radar, and our goal here is, and that's the whole reason we're asking for this, in a certain sense, it'd be quicker, easier just to do that, but.
By right.
Yeah, but we want to build something really nice, and, we want to build something the city's proud of, the neighbors are proud of, even from an architectural standpoint, we want to use materials that, go beyond maybe a little bit of what you normally would see.
And I appreciate you guys working to meet with the neighbors and to be able to hear them out. That's very, 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 very important. And I'm glad y'all see that, and I hear the sincerity in that. So I appreciate that. Now that you have that, just remember, specifics. If we come back with the exact same thing without specifics, we got a problem. So,
Which, not to cut you off there, sorry, Herb.
That's fine.
A lot of it appears to be neighbors and getting around with a lot of the department heads and tightening up those things of that nature. Whether it shows up in a body of, text, as a rider to this, hey, some of this might be, I shouldn't say pending, but we want to get as much of it wrinkled out, all the wrinkles out with the department heads as possible, and bring that information back to y'all, that we've met with them, we're meeting their expectations and things of that nature.
And then we'll be, at the next meeting also, you will have a public input at the same time on exactly what you present as well. And so that's why it's good to get ahead of it like you guys are planning to do. And I appreciate that very much. So I guess that'll end this part of our meeting of the workshop that we have right now. And we appreciate you coming.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the input, that really was.
Appreciate, yeah, taking the time to give us the feedback. That's important. Thank you very much.
The next thing that we move to, are there any action items?
There are no action items.
No action items. Any advisory items from staff?
No advisory.
Any discussion items? None of those. Any staff reports?
I do have a staff report, and it's kind of, now that the new members of the timing's worked out really well, just to kind of, whether, you know, since they may or may not be familiar, the city has, you know, several different classes of subdivisions that we approve. And the smallest group of subdivisions are the ones with 4 lots or less with no street involved. Staff can approve those administratively. They meet the same standards as the minors and the majors that come to the planning commission. It's just without the streets involved. It makes it you know, easier and just up to 4 lots. And so we approve them, and then periodically we report on them as they come through. We had one that we wrapped up before the last meeting, and it was going to be then, but now we've had a couple of months where we didn't meet. So I've kind of put together a real simple report, and just with the basics, I'll give you a copy of it. And pass these down. So this last one, and it's kind of sort of typical what we see. It's the University Cottages LLC. They have they've got a little over half an acre parcel over Calhoun Street. They applied for, they took splitting that one piece of land up and creating 3 lots total. So there'd be 2 new lots. They ended up, they had to go through the zoning, and of course engineering, utilities, they do their reviews and everything. And they created 3 approximately 8,000 square foot lots. It's zoned for 2 duplexes, could be there, or single family. So the plan was they were going to build a new, there was an older home there, which is already, I think it's already been demolished. But they were going to build one new single family on one of the lots, and then a duplex on each of the 2. So that was what they did. It was approved. There were no, as long as there are no legally, the ordinance is legally valid impediments to approving the split, they can do it as long as no utility issues. Typically, the most common thing we find when we're reviewing those is from the engineering side in utilities. They, you know, sometimes they'll require an easement for utilities or something like that. So, you know, that's the most common issue that has to be dealt with. We've got another one that we've just received. It's under review right now, and it's creating, you know, it's taking 1 lot and 1 split. It's a commercial piece of property in frontage. But so anyway, I got curious and in putting this together, and I went back and pulled the records. A simple lot subdivision, which is what it's titled, was created in the standards when we did an update of the land development regulations in 2018. And since since 2018, we have had 19 total simple lot subdivisions. So that's not, you know, it's less than 3 a year on average. And that's, that is what we have actually seen. It's not just running the numbers. And we've only created 32 total new lots through this process of administrative approval. And so, yeah, and again, the average is, turns out to be less than 2 new lots per subdivision process under these rules. So again, the reviews are done in-house. It's, when the council approved it at the time, the discussion was, in a lot of these cases, and what we have seen, you can do a family transfer if you've got a larger lot, you want to give a child something. Council discussed at the time not, wanting to impose any more of a burden on that process when in the end, because if it meets all the standards, it meets all the standards. And so it's just a streamlined process. This is kind of a summary of where we are with it. We didn't know how many there would be when it was put into the rules to allow. You could, it expanded it slightly from what had been on the books for years. So from a staff standpoint, we think it's a success. It's definitely helped out the average family. We're not talking about big developers in most cases. So
This should also clue you into why land is so expensive in the city of Clemson.
Yeah.
Fairly easy.
yeah,
And it also gives clue to, a lot of fear out there, but I'll never say we're close, but we're getting built out as far as what's available to actually subdivide within the city limits. We've grown a little bit with that last phase of the Grange to about 8 square miles, but finding an available infill lot in the city of Clemson is gonna be something you should have done a decade ago if you're looking today.
a couple of them, just to kind of add on to that, a couple of these were like the children who had inherited something from their parents who had taught at the university decades ago, and the children are retiring now. They live in another part of the United States, and so it's just a piece of land sitting there. They had there's no like an emotional attachment to it. They're never coming back. So this made it, a simpler process for that to get something out of it.
Any other planning commission and council, future workshops or events?
Nope.
Seeing that there are none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor? Meeting adjourned.